4.4 billion of us live in cities, but we don't live there alone. There's something lurking in the shadows in our suburbs. Their screams echo through the night, they run rampant through the dark, and they tear our bins asunder. This is the skull of Vulpes vulpes, or as it's commonly known, the red fox. Over the last 100 years, sightings of foxes in our cities have skyrocketed. But as they make their homes alongside us, they're changing. In 2020, scientists studied hundreds of fox skulls and found that urban foxes have different skull shapes to rural foxes. One of the changes is in this region here, the sagittal crest. The sagittal crest acts as an anchor point for the jaw muscles, and typically a bigger crest means a bigger bite force. They also found urban foxes have shorter and wider snouts, with wider nasal regions. And these changes could be adaptations to what the animals are eating. Urban foxes have access to something that their country cousins can only ever dream of: our rubbish. Whilst rural foxes have long snouts ideal for snapping at prey, urban foxes are less reliant on hunting, and instead could have shorter, more powerful jaws for munching through our leftovers. You don't hear a leftover kebab running through the streets. You don't watch it skittering between the alleys, but a bigger nose might help you smell it out if it's in a bin. They also found urban foxes have smaller brain cases, and there's less of a difference between male and female animals. And what's really interesting about this is we've seen something similar in other species, but under slightly different circumstances. Domestication syndrome is a set of changes that happens between domesticated animals and their wild counterparts. We see this in cats, in dogs, in all sorts of livestock. And the most common changes are shorter muzzles, smaller brain cases, less of a difference between male and female animals, and a willingness to be around and near people, which all sounds very familiar. Now, I'm not saying that urban foxes are domestic animals. They're wild, they should be treated with respect that deserves. But what I think is absolutely fascinating is these repeating patterns in how we as people interact with animals and change them, sometimes without even realizing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You ran off there. Went hook through some bins, or just right straight on. Thank you so much. That was absolutely brilliant. That was fascinating. Any questions, Jonathan?
Yeah, thank you. How far back does the research data go in terms of studying these changes in the skull, kind of size?
So in this study, it runs to about the 1920s. All of the work was done in 2020, but what they did was they took skulls from museums, which is where we get a lot of our historical data. And what they then did was looked not just at whether it's a city now, but whether it was a city in the 1920s, because some of those areas are now cities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fantastic. Chris, did you have a question there?
Yeah, just ask. I can understand the differences in the sort of snout and the hearing because of the food sources, but you mentioned they're male and female. There was not much difference. Why is that?
So all of the changes might be linked. The jury's still out. So neural crest cells are a type of stem cell. So these are cells that can turn into any other type of cell. And the neural crest cells in mammals turn into parts of our skulls and the adrenal glands. So it might be a case of if you have fewer neural crest cells, your adrenal cells aren't doing as much, and that means we get less adrenaline, which is where we get our fight and flight from. So it might be a case of these differences between male and female, the differences in the skull, and also differences in temperament and willingness to put up with stress and people are all actually caused by the same thing.
Well, thank you so much. All a round of applause, please.